All right, welcome to AI Captain, the podcast that helps you navigate the complexities of AI development and deployment by sharing the internal story of WWT's AI journey. I'm your co-host, Marc DeSantis, and today we're going to talk about generative AI and its applications in various contexts, such as data analysis, reporting, and software development. The conversation includes topics like the limitations of AI in understanding complex data and the potential future of AI in business intelligence and data APIs. But first, an important thought exercise on if aliens possess AI.
WWT presents AI Captain.
So if the aliens exist, the 1%,
they're probably so much smarter than us they didn't need artificial intelligence.
They don't need AI.
They're just straight up intelligent.
Or did we get the AI from the aliens?
We probably did, through the deep state.
Because nobody still, I was reading an article this morning where Anthropic is starting to figure out how these LLMs work.
Oh, through the analysis of the neural networks.
Of the neurons, yeah. But nobody really knows how they work, right? So
that's our own brains, and we don't understand it.
Yeah.
So,
but if there's any conspiracy theories out there, right, like how they couldn't have built Stonehenge when they did, or the pyramids, like AI would be a good conspiracy theory as far as attributing it to the aliens.
I'd like to build a clock. Use these really big stones.
Yeah, so when we talk about AI conspiracy theories, we have, we mentioned like the pyramids and Stonehenge, stuff like that. They didn't have AI at the time, but AI is probably not the best use case for designing those systems anyway. Thinking about some of our own prioritization discussions, have you seen any examples of, people bringing random ideas to the table that probably aren't best served by AI?
I think so far, and it's probably one of these things where AI might not be at the stage too, but a lot of the ones have been more around numerical data. Like I want to be able to ask, I want to just dump a bunch of numerical data, schemas, tables, et cetera, and then be able to ask it questions.
And that's specific to generative AI, right? That's
specific to generative AI.
That's one of the, kind of points that we've been talking about recently. And, I know with our executive call this coming week, we're going to be going through some predictive AI, machine learning topics where it is all about numbers, right?
Yep.
But yeah, when we talk about generative AI, the LLMs are getting better at math, but at least where they started, they were terrible at math, right? And when we look at doing analysis across multiple complex data points, AI is great at summarizing, especially like summarizing text and, intents behind, the text. But when we talk about summarizing numbers, that's where we tend to see a lot of hallucinations.
Right. It is. I think the part that might be interesting in the future is we've been looking at and playing around with some of the agentic stuff, is whether or not we can get to a stage where you could ask a generative AI assistant, hey, I'm trying to figure out X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Here's a data source. Can you orchestrate analysis and give? But I think it'll be some time before we can get there. B, I think we'll need to also manage the user expectations that isn't a 3-second response time type of thing. That is more of a I'm literally asking the assistant.
And it's a good reminder though of choosing the right LLM. Because take an example of some of the agents that we've been working on. There's one in particular that goes out and it grabs web activity, right? So we have something called digital insights. Digital insights kind of reflect where our customers are spending their time on our website.
Right.
And that is often used as a lead generation mechanism for our sales teams. So they get an email every week with, just kind of a recap of where their customers are spending their time. And so we've been trying to build out an AI agent that replicates that and basically feeding in all of this, web analytic data. And it's been working well, but starting off with GPT 3.5 Turbo, I think we were using, what we saw was, like we were just talking about, like it's doing math, right? So it's taking these, complex data structures that are primarily, analytical, so lots of numbers, summarizing it what we're trying to do is give the users the ability to kind of summarize it and slice and dice it in different ways. And that wasn't working well in 3.5. But once we switched it over to use 4, we started to see a lot better results from that. And I think, as we see some of these LLMs that are being released, it seems like, weekly or biweekly recently, a lot of the newer features, like we're seeing, at least the marketing is kind of geared towards, now they can do math, right? They're better at summarization of this kind of data, which I think that's going to be a powerful future where, users can not only ask it questions about, a company, but getting into kind of the business intelligence within the company, right? So kind of a new way of unlocking traditional reporting.
Right. And I think that in and of itself starts to create focus. As we talked about, I think last time, the generative stuff is us focusing then on how do we get good content and the curation of it. It's going to put even more focus on the structured data as well, and making sure that is well structured, easily understood, even from a reporting standpoint. Good reports that can be easily understood by generative AI.
This episode is brought to you by Rubrik. Ready for complete cyber resilience? Rubrik helps you achieve business resilience against cyber attacks, malicious insiders, and operational disruptions by securing your data wherever it lives, across enterprise, cloud, and SaaS, making your business unstoppable.
And when we talk about that, I think many companies have spent probably the last 10 years building out their data warehouses, right? So we have a lot of good structured data out there, that is ripe for summarization. I think the next question is how do you get to it, right? So there has been a trend of isolating data into, in our case, maybe like an Oracle data warehouse,
right,
that isn't necessarily API enabled, right? It's more kind of your traditional connections into data, right? Like running SQL queries and connecting into data that way. Now we do have AI, and we have examples of that here, that can generate SQL, right? Can take a user's prompt and turn that into SQL and then query the data. I think what we found though is that tends to be inefficient.
Right.
Whereas what I've seen with LLMs interacting with APIs, like teaching an LLM to do function calling, providing tools to it, like giving it a description of what the tools can do, and then understanding the parameters that those tools have, tends to be a faster approach because you're not relying on the LLM taking the prompt and turning it into SQL, which is a programming language. You're more just asking it to provide back a function and then the parameters for it, and then you can take that and go off and execute it within your system. And so I wonder if in the future there's going to be maybe a renewed focus on data APIs, right? So reporting APIs, things that help enable this kind of next generation of
I'm sure there will
reporting.
be, but I think the thing that was coming to my mind when you were kind of describing that, and even in that case that you said of where we built one that could translate something into SQL, the prompt goes to great lengths to describe the data schema, and APIs are really you all at the programming level putting the concepts and the business logic over the data itself.
Exactly.
So in that regard, I would kind of go with the generative AI being outside of not necessarily direct access to the data.
Yeah.
And more so, what we're seeing is that you are creating order out of this space. Now that being said,
it is a similar approach, right? Because you're right. It's not executing the SQL itself. It's just giving you the SQL to execute. But I think with an API, you as a programmer, and in the future, it'll be programmers and AI building these APIs, which is kind of what we're doing now with GitHub Copilot. But the API is effectively doing, SQL with guardrails, right? So the SQL that the API is generating understands which indexes are going to be the most performant, right? Whereas, giving all that information to the LLM, I think becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yes.
And so that's kind of where I guess my question was coming from. How do we, enable the most efficient access into that data that the LLMs could could utilize.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, but I guess that's where we are seeing, a lot of the big players creating the, whether it's on the Microsoft Fabric level or Salesforce with Einstein 1 or whatnot, is essentially, hey, take your data, do zero copy view in, and then they start to then provide that layer of Gen AI on that.
Right.
That may be though more where it evolves to Gen AI on that with something like GitHub Copilot to produce the APIs, or maybe that's where some of that will become somewhat autonomous. A little scary, but then it's like, hey, I need an API that does X, Y, and Z. So you've got one system that understands all of your data at that level, trying to interact with another system that's trying to get more of the business outcome. And then the two can work together.
So the reason that I'm thinking a lot about APIs these days is, we often have the question, within our software development projects, where does the logic go? And it seems like a simple answer, but there is always a tendency to put more logic into a front end than should be there. And on our team, we have web front ends, we have mobile front ends, and so that's really like force the developers to think differently. Like we can't put logic in a front end application because we need it to be used in both contexts, right? Across web and mobile. Now we've got a third context coming into the mix, which is AI, right? Like how does the LLM interact with that data? And so, a lot of what we've been talking about this week on my team is when it comes specifically to getting great questions and answers out of a system, maybe what we need to start doing is focusing first on the API. And in our case, with our corporate website, rather than taking all the data out of it and putting it into another system so that AI can interact with it, how do we first prioritize search within the system, right? And so when we talk about video transcripts, podcast transcripts, all of these additional data sources that we want people to be able to search on, but then also the fine tuning of that search so that we have just search that everybody's happy with and feel great about, that becomes a much more useful foundation, right? For all of those contexts, right? Because if you have three contexts, web, mobile, and now AI, they all start with the same APIs. They're all getting fed the same data points. And then, the AI is great at summarizing. Mobile and web also have their use cases. So that's kind of where we're starting to focus on.
Because I want to make sure I get it. But today we've been doing we've built the chat bot, and we've been working on taking the content and the information out of here.
Moving it into the cloud.
It's accessible here. And what I think you're saying is, in a way, is really make the application itself AI enabled, such that this is maybe an interface point, but you've not moved the business logic, embedded it over here.
That's all for this episode of AI Captain, where we discuss the importance of choosing the right AI models, data warehouses and APIs, and software development. All important aspects of our AI journey here at WWT to date. If you enjoyed this episode and found it informative and insightful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to tune in next time when we'll talk about the use of AI and its role as an assistant in various business processes. Until then, remember, AI is not the captain, but the co-pilot.